I am Captain Logan, and this is day 240 of Spawn Year. My hand is shaking uncontrollably as I write this entry. It sometimes takes a full minute to write a single word. I am out of power and out of time. My insides are burning and my head is in a nauseous frenzy. I may have one last review in me if I muster every last ounce of resolve and concentration, but I fear it won't be long before I'm as coherent as Ozzy Osbourne covering Smells Like Teen Spirit. I am completely at the mercy of Spawn Year now. If this is to be my final entry, I commit myself to working toward the same goal I've always striven for, even if I do so in vain, returning to my family. And so, another critique, even if it is to be my last. Despite my fatigue and torment, I was quite taken by the mythic atmosphere and grave tone of this issue, both in the writing and the art. A couple days ago, I criticized McCormick Sharp's lack of sharpness in his detail and backgrounds. He's outdone himself this time around, and I think he's even surpassed his brilliant work on the first issue. He evokes a legendary flavor with every page. His arc here is vivid, varied, but retains the bold, distinct look that set this comic apart from the beginning. He's back to that medieval painting influence, especially in the shipwreck scene that opens the tale. The danger or sadness or beauty Logan is trying to get across in his narration is always perfectly communicated on the page. I'm also impressed by the rich and varied color palette, from the hopeless browns in the shipwreck scene to the lush greens and purples when we're introduced to the free-spirited and nature-loving Maeve, to the bleak, terrible blacks and reds of death when she discovers the massacre of every young and able-bodied man in her village. There's more style than story here, but this issue serves to establish an important new character and the conflict for this arc, and does its job nicely. I do think all this setup would have a greater impact on me if I hadn't read the prologue, or at least if that issue had excluded any images from Spawn's memory about what really happened during the events that play he saw made a farce out of. Covenant, trussed up in a crucifixion pose in the woods, his legs cobbled off at the knees, is a striking image. McCormick Sharp knows we've seen it already, and it shows in his artwork. I still like this picture, but what he gave us last time was practically iconic, and that splash page belongs in this issue. Spawn boards a sailing vessel, hoping to isolate himself from humanity so he stops causing needless misery in his second life. But the crew doesn't take as kindly to his creepy skeleton face as the riffraff watching the play 100 years later will. I guess these are less tolerant than accepting times, but he boarded before the captain knew about it, so there's little to be done out on the high seas. Just try telling the Hellspawn to walk the plank and see who's swimming with the fishes. So when a huge storm threatens the vessel, as seems inevitable with every period piece set at sea, Spawn is blamed for it as a bad omen. Presumably it's the survivors who imprison him out in the middle of nowhere, but we're not told. We do know Spawn refused to use his power to free himself, feeling worthy of his punishment and not wanting to be a blight on all mankind, so perhaps he welcomed the barbarism. Never mind, it sounds like this Spawn would have happily walked the plank. This is the sort of noble, self-sacrificial standing around and doing nothing proactive I can get behind. None of that, woe is me, my face looks like month-old pizza, I better cry in this alley and hope comic nerds want to read about it for years crap. Guess what? 40 years pass and we don't have to listen to one lamention, monologue, speech, or soliloquy from Covenant. We just get back to him when stuff starts happening again. Seems the obvious way to go, but in a Spawn comic, it deserves some prestigious award. We're introduced to Maeve, an instantly likable 14-year-old girl described as a wild one who's introspective, clever, and sees the world the way it seems to be and not like she's told it is. Logan makes her real, with specific, unique details, and gives us observations from her own point of view. I like how she views nature. Logan writes, "She could never understand why men would clutter in the musty confines of a church house when it was clear that God himself preferred the outdoors." That line foreshadows what comes next, after Maeve comes upon the mysterious and horrific slaughter of all the young men in her village who had met for a traditional ceremony of counting potential soldiers in arms in case the village needed protecting. She gets a communication from God, or at least that's who she thinks it's from, telling her to find Covenant and he will be their champion. She gets a lot of information miraculously and can prove to the rest of her village her vision with intimate personal details only they and their dead loved ones would know. Maeve and the children all take up arms and find Covenant, who is naturally reluctant to engage in another supposedly righteous crusade. We've seen how those have gone for him in the past, and Maeve also knows a surprising amount about the Hellspawn and calls this his chance, finally, for forgiveness of his sins by heaven. I wish we hadn't seen the future already, because we know he's still walking the earth 60 years from now and not living in eternal paradise. But I'm looking forward to discovering the evil threat that killed several dozen men, all armed to the teeth, and how Cog fits into all this. Except that I am in a grave, paralyzing trap myself, and unlike Covenant, I couldn't muster the power right now to save myself. It has taken countless, painstaking hours to compose this entry, and I can at last take pride that I fought to the bitter